Arch Manning was the most talked about backup quarterback probably ever back in 2024 when he was behind Quinn Ewers. As a matter of fact, as soon as the kid was in high school, his career was followed very closely, and we all know why, his last name. And then he went to the most polarizing college football program in the country, putting even more of a spotlight on the guy despite being a backup his first 2 years. It's crazy to see how Arch Manning has been covered over his short career thus far and the roller coaster ride he's been on. He was seen as the hero, the savior of Texas football, and as quickly as he was propped up on a pedestal, he was thrown to the curb after a slow start in 2025. And now the hype is through the roof once again, as many people are expecting a big 2026 season. Today I want to talk about Arch's journey and the mental toughness he's displayed over the past couple of years or so, and why I think that might be one of his best, if not his best trait moving forward. And I think it's something that's going to make him special, not only for this 2026 season, but for his entire football career moving forward. Early on in Arch's career at Texas, he was a fan favorite and was dubbed the next big thing. Not for anything on the field, but for simply because of his last name. Yeah, he was certainly some amount of good in high school, but many fairly questioned the competition he faced in a lower division at the high school level. In his first 2 years at Texas, Manning played sparingly as he was the backup to Quinn Ewers and Malik Murphy, two guys who were more experienced than him. However, in 2024, Arch got a bunch more playing time, mainly in his 16-wheeler package, but he also started 2 games when Ewers went down with injury. And this was when the rumblings of making Manning the starter went to a whole nother level. In Arch's 2 starts, he threw for 68% completion percentage, 583 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not bad for a guy making his first 2 career starts, right? That being said, it didn't deter Sark from doing what was best for the team and sticking to his word that Quinn was the guy. Arch didn't complain, he didn't pout, the Manning family didn't say anything, he just put his head down and kept working. Quinn ended up declaring after that season, putting Arch in prime position to be the full-time starter in 2025. The hype was at an all-time high. He was a projected Heisman, first-team All-American. He was going to lead Texas to the national championship, then be the first overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft. And yeah, all those things weren't out the realm of possibility due to his talent. It was very unfair for all these pundits and media to put these expectations on a guy who's only started 2 career games up to that point. But with that last name, greatness is expected no matter what. Well, week 1 came and he struggled. Week 3 came and he struggled mightily again, completing under 50% of his passes against one of the worst group of 5 teams that year in UTEP. It was so bad, he even got booed off the field at home at halftime and prompted Sark to say this.
Well, I told Arch before the season, you've never really been a quarterback until they boo you. He got booed in the first half, now he can start playing.
To start SEC play at Florida, he was again not good. He seemed overwhelmed by defenses, he had happy feet in the pocket, therefore he was wildly inaccurate, especially on layup throws. Overall, it seemed as if he was overthinking the game. Although Texas had one of the worst O-lines in the SEC, one of the worst running games in the SEC, and his receivers not being able to get open consistently, nobody cared, and all the blame in the world went to Manning. And at that point, it seemed like his Texas career was in a tailspin. Texas fans were calling for him to be benched. The most hyped up, anticipated player ever was now all of a sudden college football's first flop. In an article by The Athletic, they cited how Arch Manning was the biggest flop in college football history, not only because of his poor performance, but also because the hype that came in the preseason that he apparently created himself. They were talking about all his endorsements and commercials were bringing in all this attention towards him, and in turn putting more pressure on himself. The criticism, although probably too much, was somewhat understandable considering Texas was the #1 overall team in the preseason in the country with a loaded roster full of other potential preseason All-American, All-Conference type players and 4 or 5-star blue chip guys. At that point in the season, Texas was 3-2, unranked, with 4 top 10 teams remaining on the schedule. The end of the tunnel looked dark for Texas. But after that loss to Florida, it seemed as if Sark made everything more simplistic for Arch and took a lot off his plate when it came to the game plan. It gave Arch the opportunity to not think as much and just play ball. From the OU game on, Arch was more calm in the pocket, got rid of happy feet for the most part, and just balled out. Texas won 7 of their last 8 games, as Arch accounted for 21 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, and Texas even miraculously found themselves in the college football playoff talk in late November, ranked number 10 in the country. Although that didn't end up happening, Manning and the Longhorns built up a lot of momentum heading into this 2026 season. I think the biggest difference we saw in Arch's game from the first half of the season to the second half was his decision making got sharper. He played with more conviction. The game slowed down for him and it allowed him to go through his reads without rushing. In many cases, when you have an inexperienced young quarterback, most of the time they're slower than what the offense is around them. But I think Arch was actually playing too fast, too ahead, to where it was out of sync with his receivers and his O-line. It didn't match. Arch somehow turned himself into one of the best quarterbacks in the college football season after that horrid start. Yes, it was a down year for quarterbacks overall in college football in 2025, but from where Arch was in early October to where he ended up by the end of December development-wise is just a testament to his hard work and sticking with it. In that spot, it would have been so easy for Arch to get down on himself and let that talk around him affect his play, but that didn't happen. For him to endure that roller coaster ride of emotions, when everyone has an opinion about you, everyone's nitpicking every little thing that you do, for him to stay level-headed, for him to just have a tunnel vision was honestly very impressive. He handled himself in the best possible way. He always took accountability for not playing well. He never deflected the blame. He never ran from the media. He stood there and faced every single bit of it. For his future as a quarterback that'll be in the NFL sooner rather than later, that mental toughness trait will go a long way for him. I give his family a ton of credit too, knowing it would be a work in progress for him to get developed. They knew it would be in his best interest to maybe sit a year or two and to get developed. Cooper Manning and even Arch himself came out and said Cooper and the rest of the Manning family knew the right thing to do was to sit back and develop for a year or two in order to gain more confidence or refine his skills a little bit, because there's a long game. There's no rush to get Arch into the NFL. Not to mention, it's been known that Steve Sarkisian's offenses are complex and hard to grasp, especially as a young quarterback. Why would you throw a true freshman into the wolves like that and destroy his confidence? Arch definitely has grandpa traits of him being mobile and elusive and athletic, but I think his best trait is his Eli Manning trait of not really caring what the media has to say about him and what other people around him, the outside noise, have to say. Eli played in New York for 17 years? And he built a really tough skin like that. Arch has built some very tough skin in his 3-4 years at Texas. I want to also give Steve Sarkisian a ton of credit for being patient with Arch and ultimately not succumbing to the outside noise and pressures that comes with having a Manning on the roster. He didn't feel the pressure to start Arch early in his career. He didn't bench Arch when things were starting to look very bad for him. And ultimately, at every turn, he had his quarterbacks back in the media. He was asked so many times about Arch's struggles early on in the season, and Sark always made sure to defend his guy and even take blame himself for not getting Arch prepared in certain aspects. That being said, I think Arch will be just fine moving forward. I think he'll have a really good 2026 season. I'm not going to say he's going to win all these awards and Texas is going to go on and win a national championship or anything like that. But I do think the end of that 2025 season, he was able to build a really good foundation for 2026 and move forward into the NFL the year after that, because I do think he's just that talented. We saw that being put onto display. Other than that, y'all let me know what y'all think about Arch Manning's journey up to this point and how crazy the media and people can just flip on you from one second to another, right? And the mental capacity, mental fortitude that it takes to endure all that, being the talk of the town 24/7, 365. But other than that, this is Jimmy from CFB Enthusiasts. Y'all have a good one. Peace.